you're about to experience a new way to thrive in martial arts by exploring who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you believe in. It's time to rise, because this is where we challenge and say no to outdated industry norms and say yes to change, so that we create a healthier, happier, and thriving martial arts community. I'm your host, Laurien Zurhake. Welcome to the Rise to Thrive podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Ellee Beckman, a kids Jiu Jitsu coach and founder of the Art of Coaching. Having a background in teaching and psychology, her work centers on helping coaches understand child development, the importance of play, and why coaching is more than just knowing Jiu Jitsu. In this conversation, Ellee highlights the importance of adaptability as a coach, which ties in with her implementation of the constraint-led approach. Although we focus mainly on kids, this episode also sheds light on how we can improve adult classes. Before we dive right in April, I have the honor of instructing alongside Greg Souders and Carlos Carvalho during a constraint-led approach camp in Faro, Portugal. What's more, I also organize CLA camps, and we have limited spots left for the camp with Ed Ingemels and Rafael Saib, and one spot left for the Cal Jones and Rob Bianacchi camp. So if you're interested, please book soon. Now, without further ado, Ellee Beckman. Welcome, Ellee. I'm so happy to have you now on my podcast. So now I have the opportunity and the delight and privilege to learn more about you, because in the space of kids and CLA, it's you. And that's why I really would like to dive deeper into that with you, specifically for the Art of Coaching series, because we have had a lot of striking and grappling, but that was more tailored to adults, and we cannot forget kids. So Ellee, thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you. And we're switching it now. So I'm looking forward to, I don't know what you're going to throw at me, but I'll do my best in every way. And the last chat that we had together was so lovely. So thank you for having me on.
Well, it's what they say, right? Adaptability. We're going to test this now.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's start then with the warming up questions. Like, tell us a bit about who you are. How did you get into Jiu-Jitsu? I know you're also a school teacher. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So, I guess it goes all the way back to high school, really. So I was in year 12 and I was doing high school. And to be fair, I'm lucky I finished. I wasn't in the greatest sort of headspace for that kind of thing. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go to university. There was no way that my grades were going to allow me to do that. But also I didn't really put much effort in, so I'm not surprised. So essentially I took a traineeship at a childcare centre. And did I think that I wanted to work with kids? Not at all. I had younger siblings, and I just never thought that working with kids was something that I would enjoy. I remember I went to the traineeship interview. I remember asking people about what should I say to try and get the job. I got it. And then my first day, I just remember being like, wow, this is really cool. And I fell in love with it. And that was nearly 15 years ago. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a long time ago. It was a long time ago now. And then, over the course of the years, I continued my studies. I did diplomas in early childhood. I did this, I did that. And then I got to 21 and was like, okay, great. So in Australia now, I can go to university as an adult. So I don't have to use my marks as what I had as a teenager or high school grades. And I got straight in. I did primary and early childhood teaching. And from there, I just kept working in early childhood and primary education settings. And to be fair, it did get to the point where I obviously burnt out. It is a really hard industry. There's a lot of expectations that I think maybe sometimes people don't realize. They're like, yeah, you get lots of holidays. I'm like, yeah, but I need them to be able to cope with the madness, which, that comes with anything. But eventually I started Jiu Jitsu in 2020. So while the rest of the world was shutting down and there was all these crazy things happening, my academy was still open. We were kind of locked in this little bubble, but we were essentially allowed to live our lives as normal. a new gym had opened down the road, and I'd always wanted to do some kind of self-defense. Again, I thought of the most vulnerable, horrible places that a woman could be put. And I was like, I want to do that. That's the one that I think is going to help me the most. I don't really like being punched, so let's try this instead. And I just kind of fell in love with that too. I was never athletically gifted. I'm still not athletically gifted, but I love it. And that's how I met my partner. Met him, and he had moved from Sydney, and we kind of just went from there. Like, it just became this crazy snowball of intertwining teaching and my love for Jiu Jitsu, and my whole life has just become this crazy thing where now I get to create the systems and create the opportunities for coaches to understand kids rather than just Jiu Jitsu. Because I think sometimes we're not taught the skills to coach. We're not actually shown how to teach kids. So I've kind of taken both of those things and put them together, and that's how the art of coaching came to be.
Well, I know that I see people are sharing it, and I also think that in the space of kids training, people should give you more shout outs and listen to you more. So I think it's needed, because we have these discussions with adults and parents also in our school, that sometimes we had it also recently, that we try to integrate a kid or get a kid back into it. But before we can do it, a parent that didn't leave yet kind of destroyed our authority by immediately going into it, where I was like, yeah, but these are now my mats. It's my problem now to solve, not yours. And I know that just to also navigate the parents, which I find is the more difficult part than often navigating the kids, there's not really a lot about it. Every now and then there's maybe a reel or somebody who touches upon it, but there's not like something what you're offerings as a cohesive program where you just can learn it. Because often, like with trauma from coaching, when you know what to look for and when you understand where the kids' brains are at based on like age levels and all that kind of stuff, it's so much easier, because then also if they act out, you understand why, you don't take it personally, and you have like a kind of a guide how to deal with that. So can you dive into that more?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing that I noticed the most. I was sort of at the time that I started Jiu-Jitsu, I was finishing off uni, and I was training at this academy, and my professor was incredible. Shout out to him. Amazing man, amazing at Jiu-Jitsu. And he was a fantastic adults coach. He wasn't in charge of the kids. And at the time I would come to class, the kids' classes would be ending, and I was like, what is going on here? But I had no other experiences of anything. So I didn't know. My only experience of martial arts coaching or kids coaching had come from a one karate class that I did when I was a kid. And I did that one class and was like, no. So, I never had anything to kind of be guided by. And so all I could see was what was happening. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. Why are we doing this? These kids don't even want to be here. They don't seem like they're having fun. The role models of the academy weren't great at the time. They are fantastic now. But at the time it was, maybe not the greatest program. And this is when I was like, maybe I have something here that I can offer. And it's been interesting being able to share what I've shared, because I sometimes hit a bit of a wall with people. Usually it is coming from a really traditional martial arts background, or, people who have been coaching for a very long time, who perhaps are not open to the idea that development actually does play a role in kids. And I'm not just spouting words for the sake of it. There is actual science behind what I'm saying. So we're still getting there with that. But I do think that there is a change there. And I've had a lot of people who have sent me messages or joined my school community or done these things that they're like, oh, I didn't realize that there are actual developmental needs of children at certain ages. That means that they're not just naughty, they're not bad behavior. They actually just don't understand what I'm saying. I'm like, yeah, it's actually not a you problem. Like, I know that it sounds crazy, but yeah, it's actually a development thing. You're not just, it's not your coaching. You just don't know how yet. And so when we talk about development of kids and how I tailor this to kids coaching is if you have kids on mats at the age of 3, we know, I mean, you don't need rocket science to know that a 3-year-old's different from a 10-year-old. Like, you can physically see that. But the learning that is happening in their brains is completely different. The part of their brain that works as the primary part of their brain is going to be completely different to someone who's an adult. So then I think we see kids have these meltdowns, or we see them be defiant on the mats, and they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then the adult kind of like digs their heels in more, and they're like, well, I'm the boss, I'm the black belt, I'm the adult, you're going to do what I'm telling you to do. And then the kid's like, no, I'm not. And then we end up with this power struggle that is completely unnecessary. And all it takes is just a general understanding that, hey, if this kid's being really defiant right now, what's actually happening? Or if this kid's crying, what's happening? I constantly say, and I'm a really big believer that there is no such thing as bad behavior. And I know that that sounds super like, what do you mean kind of thing, but behavior is feedback and it's data. So if we can understand the data of what we're being given, we have an opportunity to be able to understand and support it. So when you think about a 5-year-old on the mats who has maybe, this is their first time doing anything like jiu-jitsu, you have music playing, you have a coach talking, you have kids yelling, then you're asking them to sit on another person. That's pretty weird, by the way. What we do is weird. And so you're putting them into a space where they're told their whole lives not to touch someone, not to be near them, hands off. Even now with the generations, in front of ours, we even ask permission for hugs now. So then it's like, why do we then just expect these kids to be okay with being put in these situations which are a bit weird? All of those things compound into complete overstimulation. And then we wonder why they won't listen. So I think that there's so many things that contribute from how we develop kids' classes. Obviously, I'm a massive CLA advocate. There's reasons for this. But even if you're using traditional teaching methods, you don't need to do CLA to be able to understand children's development and have better classes based on just understanding where kids are at.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had this recently with the little ninjas. It's like starts with us like 2 or 3-year-olds, depending, because some 2-year-olds are a bit further than others. But so we had this one kid, and I just lined him up to start. Just before we started, he was crying. And I asked him, like, oh, why are you crying? He's like, because I'm tired. And then I said to him, like, and I was that day also really exhausted. So I said to him, oh my boy, I so understand you. If I could, I would also cry because I'm also tired. And then the parents still standing there, they were like, me too, like same. But what was interesting was that because I said that, he looked at me and was like, you're also tired? And I said, yeah. I said, so, but you're still here. So I'm like, just do what you can. And I'm sure we'll figure it out. Okay. So then, even though he was sometimes still with tear-eyed during the class, he did with, and he enjoyed himself. But you could see that in his brain, you could see that he was like, huh? So adults can also be tired, because I think you could see it was new to him that I was like, well, if I could cry, I would actually cry with you because I'm also tired. And then when he saw the other parents like, me too, it was for him such an interesting moment. But he was like, okay, because he felt validated. It was not, barked at like, yeah, you're here, train. No, I'm like, okay, we'll just do what's possible. He did beautifully with, and it was a very fun class. But it was just a funny moment because you could see the confusion on his face, like, huh? It's cute.
Yeah, exactly. And we've had that in our classes where I remember this little boy was crying and my partner was like, why are you crying? And he's like, I don't know. And we were like, okay, that's okay. Sometimes our body just has a lot of emotion. I have that too. Sometimes I cry and I don't know why I'm crying. It's like, just go and have a little drink of water, grab a hug, come back. It's okay. And I think something that I like to, and I tell this to my coaches all the time on the mats, I'm like, at the beginning of the class, you have an opportunity to find out exactly where your kids are at. You have the opportunity to check in, build rapport, build trust, but also your general questions, which probably just sound like, how's your day, actually give you the information of how their day was. So when they're in that 3 to 5's age range, some of them might go to like kindy or preschool. Some of them might be at school by the time that they're 5, depending on where you're at in your country and things like that. But generally, they're not at like big school yet, and they also are not necessarily at kindy all day every day. But some of them are too. And so you've got this big difference where, you know, you have a bunch of kids that come on the mat and I'm like, what'd you do today? And then they'll tell me what they did. And they'll be like, oh, I played in the sandpit. I'm like, oh, did you play in the sandpit at school? And they're like, yeah, I played with my friend. I'm like, okay, so this kid's been to school. Okay, now I know that they've already had a lot of energy that they've had to use throughout the day. And then I'll be like, oh, did you have lunch at kindy? What'd you have for lunch? And then they'll be like, oh, I didn't like lunch today. I didn't eat that. I'm like, great. Okay, so now I know this kid's burned a lot of energy but hasn't put anything in their bodies. And now they're coming straight to jiu-jitsu. And I'm a hangry person. So I know that then, like, if I'm hangry, the kid can possibly be hangry too. But all of those things help you to know what you're going to get throughout the day, because you never know.
I think that's also where opportunity is so important, because sometimes I have things planned in my mind, but they come inside and I'm like, nope, I think today they need something different. We're not going to do this today. And I think as a coach, you also need to be able to do that. And indeed, asking questions like what you do helps. Like usually after the weekend, I also ask him like, hey, what was the coolest thing you did over the weekend, or the most challenging thing? And you get better answers, because if I ask them yes or no question, are you okay? It's an either yes or no question. But even if they feel bad, people tend to say yes anyways. So it's like, I also like to just ask more the questions where they have to think about something and kind of give me a bit more sentences and not a yes or no type kind of answer. But yeah, sometimes as a coach, I'm like, nope, we need to do something else today, which is fine. And I think when coaches are flexible there, then the class will be all right.
Yeah, adaptability is massive. I mean, it's massive with any coaching, but kids in particular. You can plan all you like for the class that's in your head, but if you continue to try and push that class that's in your head into a group of kids that they're not there for that class that day, you are only hurting yourself at that point, because you're the person that's going to end up stressed. You're the person that's overwhelmed. And something that I always say is that you can choose to be the thermostat or the thermometer of the room. So the thermometer can only read the temperature, right? They don't do anything else. It reads the temperature, and that's where you essentially are. The thermostat sets the temperature. So you're having the ability to then set the level of the energy to set the control of the room. So if you are stuck with this plan in your head and pushing this, but the temperature is risen to a point where it's already chaos, or the opposite, and they're so low on energy and they're exhausted and they can't do what you're asking, you can't mix anything here. You're already stuck with this. But if you can just allow that adaptability to then be the thermostat, you can be like, okay, like you said, that class is not going to work today. I'm reading the energy. I'm essentially reading the temperature of the room and going, okay, this isn't going to work. I'm now going to adapt my class to set the temperature that I know will work for the class. So yeah, you can choose thermostat, thermometer.
So if we, so often people have like, in general, schools have like, we have it like 3 to 5-ish, then we have like 6 to like 10, and then, or like 9-ish, and then we have like the teens. What would you say it would be like for each age group a big thing regarding the brain development that coaches should bear in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's use it from, I am going to use it from a CLA perspective, because that's something that I have the most sort of experience with. But in general, when you're considering 3 to 5-year-olds, I suppose it's not even just CLA here, but we really want to talk about one instruction or one goal. So essentially what's happening, kids go through stages of play, and once they get to sort of 3 to 4, 5, there you can kind of see the difference between a 3 and a 5-year-old. The ability level is different. But that 3 to 4 range, they're in something generally called parallel play. So they're able to work alongside each other, but not necessarily together that well. So the thing that I commonly see with CLA in particular when we're trying to create games is that they don't realize yet that they're working together and they don't know that each one has a goal or they're trying to do something. So what happens is one person's, say, like playing dirty feet where the person's on the bottom, they have their arms and legs in front. So they're like, yeah, I've got it. And then all of a sudden the person's got chest to chest and they look at you like, what? And this is because, yeah, what's happened? And it's because they realize they're doing their job. They've got their arms and legs in front, but they have forgotten that the person actually is going to do something, which is getting chest to chest. So then they look at you like, what do you mean that person just got it already? They can't see both goals. So there's nothing wrong with this. Your games aren't bad. Your kids aren't bad at Jiu Jitsu. It is just where they're at developmentally. And so this parallel play works like this, where they, the way traditionally it's kind of, traditionally explained, but you could have like a role-playing situation where you're like, the kids are going to play mums and dads, for example. And the one kid's like, I'm going to be the mum. And then the other kid's like, well, I'm going to be the dad. And then they're like, cool. And then they go this way and they play completely separate games, but they're playing the same game. So they're talking like they're role-playing, but they're not actually playing together yet. But once we get into the 5+ kind of age range, this is when we have cooperative play. And this is like the sweet spot for CLA particularly, because we start to see some really cool things happen. And essentially they now know that they've got to do something to have a reaction, to have their goal as well. And so when they're cooperating in their play, we are able to have more complex goals. We're able to have more complex ideas. Still nothing massive. I think that sometimes we can overcomplicate it again in this age range. But the beauty of it is that you can also scale it to make it, wherever it needs to be for a 6-year-old compared to an 8-year-old or whatever it is. But the biggest difference is that developmental stage of play and where they're at. So those little ones, when you're creating, even in a traditional class or whatever it is, if you're making, let's say you want to develop, a knee cut pass. I don't know why I'd be teaching knee cut pass to a 3-year-old, but that's the first thing that came to my head. But say we are doing 3 to 5s and you want them to do a knee cut. You're going to need to give like 2 instructions. So it's really not really even that viable to do. How are you going to teach someone to do a knee cut in, let's say, I'll be generous, 3 steps maximum. Because if you have children of your own, or if you've ever asked children to do something in this age range, let's think about the fact that we ask them to put their socks on, put their shoes on, and get their bag for school. Even kindy at this point. They forget before they've even got their socks. You've asked them too many things. And this was something that I found I had to learn the hard way when I taught in early childhood centers, because I would be like, all right, guys, I'm going to get you to get your sunscreen, wash your hands, go to the toilet if you need, grab your hat, I'll meet you at the morning tea table. What planet I thought I was on where I thought that they were going to be able to do all of those things in that order. So half the time they would like wash their hands, go to the toilet, and I'd be like, no, other way, guys, other way. Or they'd put sunscreen on and then, anyway. It never worked the way that I thought it was going to work. But it's taught me 100% that this age range really does need only 1 to 2 instructions. And if you're using CLA, very, very simple goals. And be okay with it not looking the way that you think it's going to look. And be okay with it, not going to have the same amount of, I suppose, resistance as the 6 and plus age range is. It's okay that it doesn't look perfect. It's okay. I mean, CLA never looks perfect, but it's okay that it doesn't look the way you think. So then you get your 6+ range. They're able to kind of handle more steps. You can really give them, if you're doing drilling, for example, you can kind of start to give those 2 to 3 step instructions, and they'll start to understand things a little bit better. But for CLA and games, this is when we can have 2 goals happening, and they don't necessarily have to be the same goal. They can be different goals. You can have a player A and a player B. You can have the offense and the defense. You can have those kinds of things start to work better. But then once we get into that older age range, this is really cool. But this is the part that I think when I've sort of spoken to coaches who are experimenting with CLA, they get to the older age range and they're like, oh, great, this is when the jiu-jitsu starts and I don't have to use games anymore because the kids can understand things. And I'm like, no, this is the best part. This is the coolest space to use CLA because now you can be doing some really cool things. You can be able to set games that are very similar to what your adults are doing. Like once they're in those teens sort of thing, they're already getting ready. Even 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds, they're ready for those kinds of things. And I love using games, for example, just 2 hooks in. So say you're developing sweeps and we're talking about 2 hooks in. But 2 hooks in my 3 to 5s class is going to be something knocking the tower down. So you're already starting 2 hooks in, holding both ankles, knock your partner down. Easy. Not much resistance. Top players trying to stay balanced, they're surfing on the surfboard, that kind of thing. 6 to 9s, then we get into this thing where 2 hooks in generally looks like, again, you get your 2 hooks behind the legs, you grab the ankles, you do the sweep. Like that really basic, I don't even know the names of things anymore. I've been doing CLA for so long, I can't even tell you the names of sweeps. But anyway, you know the one I'm talking about. And then once they get into that older age range, 2 hooks in doesn't always mean 2 hooks in straight behind the legs anymore. 2 hooks in can be X guard. 2 hooks in can be a single leg. So the games are still the same. It just changes, but the concept remains the same. So they're able to then look at, okay, if you're at 2 hooks in and the only one that you know is 2 hooks behind the legs, grab the ankles, go for it. But if you know that 2 hooks in also means X guard, go for it. And this is where that scaling works really well with CLA, but also how it looks developmentally across the entire board. Sorry, that was a lot.
I just find it very fascinating because what we have found with the 3 to 5 or 3 to 4-ish is that in the beginning we focus a lot on just movement patterns. So we don't even do, we have some grappling stuff, but we do also like a lot of animals. We build parkour, so they have to figure out on their own how they get from A to B to C to D. And it's very interesting because they figure out different things, but also you see that they start to learn also risk assessment, like that sometimes they have to jump off. We have just like these puzzle mats from what we had from the old locations. We can just make really high towers and stuff. And you can see that they also learn, okay, here I feel comfortable to jump down, here I climb down. But you also see how they scale themselves. And that's what's so cool about it, is that after they did it once or twice, they're like, okay, I can do this. So they naturally also start challenging themselves already. They scale themselves. And I find that so awesome because that shows learning, it shows courage. It's all kinds of like the personality traits that we want them to have, really, that they are daring. But also if it doesn't work out, one time a kid jumped but landed so like on his knees, like they can still do this. We would die, but like they can still do this with unscathed. And he was like, oh yeah, this wasn't nice. So next time he landed on his feet. If I would have told this boy this, I don't know, 1,000,000 times, he would not have listened. And it's like still in a controlled, safe, soft. We have all these like these soft bricks that you have also in these kind of a ninja warrior and stuff. So like they're fine, but it's so interesting to see how they do that themselves. And then with group play, the best thing that we have found so far was something where it becomes very clear that they need each other. So we took a mat and we just put a ball on it. And we had then groups of 4, so they all had this bit, and they had to balance it, just bring it to the other side of the room. Because if one was not, the ball would fall. And it was so interesting. And of course, they loved falling. They were like, whoa, and like they looked drunk. They had like drunken masters. It was so funny. But there you could really see how quickly actually start to understand that we need each other. So they were still playing with themselves, but also with each other. So that was a very interesting insight for us as we were playing this. And indeed, as they get used to how things are run, more is possible. And like one thing we also realized, like they like to possess things. So one easy way to make them grapple is just give them an object and tell the other kid to steal it. It's kind of the easiest like hack in that. And it looks like grappling immediately.
Yeah.
But it's like, it was just interesting for us indeed to see that when you also read articles about that, how early specialization doesn't mean that a kid will become the next world champion. That we are like, okay, let's then indeed focus on exploring their body. What can they all do? What does the room afford them? And then when they go into the from 5 or 6, like to the BJ kids class, you notice that those that did the ninja program versus kids that just are 6 or 7 or so, and they come just immediately like a tabla rasa in the BJ kids class, that the little ones, they are so much further, because you can see that their bodies are already so much better in problem solving. It's amazing. And indeed, as you say, the older kids, the sweet spot, we love it. We did triangles, and then my husband at one point was like, okay guys, I gave you some time, can you figure out the coolest entries? I don't exaggerate, within the minute they had flying triangles. It's so cool. And we were like, okay, not sure whether this is exactly what we want for safety things, but it was super awesome. And that's how quickly it went,
Yeah, we've had something similar it was in the 6 to 9s class, and it was a similar situation where I noticed that this boy kept trying to get leg locks, and I was like, inspiring, and I was like, I know what I can see. Can you tell me what you're doing here? Because there is things here. And he's like, well, I figured you can do the arm bar on the arm, so can I do the arm bar on the leg? And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, yes, you can, but no, you can't. You're not allowed. But I was like, how amazing that they were just like, oh yeah, well, if I can do this on the arm, I'm sure I can do it on the leg. And all of a sudden they were trying to do like knee bars. It's like, I love this for you, but give it another 10 years. And so now every time we go to do sparring, he's like, am I allowed yet? I'm like, not yet. But I love that he's figured that out because of the concept, literally the same concept. It's so cool. CLA does things that, yeah, so cool.
Then I have like adults, sometimes when we're busy with leg locks, especially back then when we were transitioning from more traditional to COA, I was like, they were afraid with leg locks. And I'm like, yeah, but a knee bar is essentially an arm bar, is on the leg. And they were like, oh, really? And then you have a kid who's just like thinking and realizing this and is thinking, well, okay, let's then go for the legs then.
Yeah. So cool. Kids are cool.
Kids are cool. What are one of the funniest things kids ever said to you in class?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I have the amount of, far out, so many things. When I was teaching, I used to hear all sorts of things. Some things I will never be able to look at parents sideways ever again with the things that they would share. But even, I've had kids tell me that what was the one the other day? I had written it down. Oh, I don't even remember. But I even had one yesterday where the parent was just finishing the class, and then the little boy was like, my daddy sped through 5 red lights to get here today. And I was like, and his dad was like, I did not. And the kid's like, yes, you did, Dad. Those lights were going red and you kept going. And the dad was like, he's told this to a police officer. He's literally dobbed me into police officer before. And I was like, are you doing that though? And he was like, no, I swear, this kid's 4. And he was like, okay, Dad, okay. But things from like the amount of times I've told kids to stop sucking their toes. I don't know why they do that. It's really, really unhygienic. If you want to suck your fingers, I'm like, that's gross enough. Stop sucking your toes. Meowing was a big one. I used to get this kid who wouldn't stop meowing. I've had kids say all sorts of things about, different coaches and being scared of them, but like in a way that's like a funny joke kind of way. I have one, but I just can't remember what it was, and it happened like 2 weeks ago. It was so good. What about you? What have you had?
We had with different things, but also like we had once 2 6-year-old girl walks to me and says, Laurien, it was in German, but like it just translated. This boy, he called me an asshole. So I walked to the kid and I said, is this true that you call her an asshole? And then he looks really distinguished, like a gentleman, looks at me. Yeah, I couldn't think of a better term. But I was like, I don't know. Do I high five him? What do I do? Like, I was like, But also we
Yeah.
had the random things that you're just explaining, and a kid just randomly walks to you and is like, "Do you know?" and just starts telling you a whole story. And I was like, "Dude, I'm like teaching, like, shut up." But
I'm in the
also
middle
like,
of something.
yeah, but also when you ask whether they have questions or something, and then a kid raised their hand, I was like, "Yeah, I have to go pee." Classic. Where I'm like, it's not what I these things, but indeed the meowing, they randomly just telling you things or going through, or sometimes they tell me things and I understand the words, but not how that fits together. So I have no idea what they're talking about. And I really try to understand them, but sometimes I have absolutely no idea what's happening. Yeah, it's just sometimes they say
Yeah.
things where I'm really like, oh my God, I should indeed write it all down and just make a book because you will just laugh nonstop.
Yeah, I completely agree. I do remember the one from, it wasn't even actually that funny. It was just clever. We have some kids in our 9 to 15s class, and they're just so bright. Like, for example, this boy came, he's 10. This is slightly sidetracked, but he came to my class 2 days ago and showed me a fidget spinner that he had made with a 3D printer. And yeah, it's just mind blowing. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's given me this thing and it works. It's amazing. It goes in, it spins, it's like a little cone. And I was like, and you made this on a 3D printer? He's like, yeah, I got a 3D printer for Christmas and I made this thing. You are amazing, really. But he does terribly at school because the school system doesn't fit literally where he's at all. But we were standing at the end of the class, and one of my coaches, bless him, he had said something about, I don't know, whether it was like a dog. He was trying to make some kind of like analogy. And I think he tried to say the word analogy and he used the word alliteration, which was not right at all. And we're standing at the end of the class. And then he was like, you know, something about a dog in a fight at a dog park, something like this. And then this kid just goes, do you mean a metaphor? And my coach was like, yeah, metaphor. And he's like, alliteration is not the same as metaphor. And he was like, oh, thank you. Thank you. Like, he was really embarrassed. But there's just this thing with these kids. They're just so smart. Like, those kids are incredible,
I also
honestly.
think that many coaches forget how they were when they were kids, and kids
Yeah.
understand an awful lot, and they make fun of you. Like, I'm not the biggest. So what I had also some months ago, one boy, he's really the clown in class. Like when he's there, it's just like he's just the clown in the class. And it was time to spar. And if when we have more coaches, and then when it's uneven, we will go in. But this time it was even. And he comes to me like this, so our eyes were closed with like this, his hand, like, to invite to roll. And I say to him like, I'm so sorry today, not because we're even and we need to watch. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, you're so small. I thought you were a kid. And I was like, you little cheeky.
So good. So good. So funny.
It's so funny, like, but you can see that probably he thought about this joke already for like the whole. He was just waiting it to be like sparring time because
Getting his moment.
yeah, this was
Yeah.
premeditated. It's just so funny because I think they understand really a lot. Because if I sometimes have a day where I know like I am not at my best, I also tell them. And interestingly enough, that are usually the classes that are the best because they understand it. They know. I said like, yeah, you guys have sometimes bad days. They're like, yeah, well, I have today one. And then usually they're like, oh, I'm so sorry that you have a bad day. But then usually like the class, it's like fine because they do give a little bit of effort then too because they understand it. And I think it's also important for them to see that adults are not perfect, that we make mistakes. If we misunderstand something, I also apologize to them and explain to it, because sometimes you also, in the chaos of everything, you don't always do the right thing, or you don't always say or make the right decision. And for them, I think it's so important that they also see that adults can also apologize to kids, and that we are not know-it-alls, far from it. That often I think I learn more from the kids than that they learn from me, in truth. I think that's really something that coaches should maybe, remember every now and then.
Oh, I 100% agree. I mean, when I was teaching, I would have kids who would come in with like their special interests, and dinosaurs and space were always like the big special interests. They love dinosaurs, they love space. Do I know anything about dinosaurs and space? Not really. And I couldn't tell you the name of all of the dinosaurs. But so these kids would come and they would ask me questions. And I would have to say, quite honestly, I don't know. I'm not sure. Do you know? And then they would either be like asking me the question because they actually just want to tell me the information, or they would be like, no, I don't know. And I'm like, I think maybe we should research this. What do you think? Let's go and see if we can find a book, or can we look online? Can we do something? And at no point was that me not being in control or being like the leader. There was no moment there. There's not undermining authority. There's nothing there. It's just being like, okay, I don't have the answer. It's okay. This is how we deal with things when we don't have an answer. We just go and find the answer together, and we work together and we find it. And it's not a big deal. And I think I was speaking to somebody about this the other day. I think we have a little bit of difficulty with this, particularly in martial arts, because traditionally the black belt is the person that knows everything. They are at the top. They're, in some academies, you still walk in and you bow to that photo. And there's nothing wrong with that if you want to bow to the photo. But what is that setting as your precedent here? This is setting it that like, this is the person who knows everything. This is the person that has all of the answers. But what happens when you don't? And so then we kind of get caught in this thing where it's like, I'm not willing to accept help, or I'm not willing to accept that I'm not perfect at this. And which is crazy, because we evolve our jiu-jitsu constantly. We're always like, the learning never ends. And you hear people talking about getting their black belts and they're like, oh, you get the black belt and then you realize the journey is just beginning. Like, there's all these things that we say. So that's no different for coaching. It's no different for the skill of understanding. And it's no different for being able to just acknowledge, like, if a kid asks you a question on the mats and you don't necessarily have the exact answer for it, okay, I don't know. Sometimes like the kids will be doing a game and I've stepped off the mats to do something, whatever I'm doing, and I've missed the instructions. And then I get on the mats to supervise and they ask me something and I look at them with a blank face. I'm like, I don't know, I'm really sorry. I wasn't actually listening. And then they're like, oh, she wasn't listening? I'm like, yeah, I'm so sorry. I got completely distracted, wasn't listening. I'll go and find out for you. And it is that thing where it's like, I'm human. I'm just like you. And on the bad days that I'm having a bad day, I'm going to tell you. If you're frustrating me and you're upsetting me, I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to yell at you, but I'm going to say, hey guys, I'm actually feeling pretty frustrated by the fact that you're not listening. It makes my body feel like a volcano. And when I have that feeling in my body, I don't feel good. Like, depending on the age range that I'm talking to, obviously. Yeah. But, generally then my little ones are like, oh, sorry. Like, that's okay. It's not your fault that I feel this in my body, but when you do this, it makes me feel this. And then they're like, oh, let's not do that anymore. Sharing emotions and sharing how you're feeling and acknowledging that you do feel angry or you do feel sad or you are frustrated or you are tired, I think it goes hand in hand with good coaching.
I think so too. Like I learned this from Cal Jones. Actually, he was also on the Thrive Drive method, and he explained that, especially for the earlier groups, is that it's still very hard for kids to stand in the shoes of another person. So instead of asking why did you do that, which is more like of a rational cause and effect question, when you need to ask them how they feel, it's easier for them to answer. But then if you have a situation, I don't know, a kid was just annoying another kid, and when you are like, why did you do that? It's hard for them to respond to that. But when you ask them like, hey, how would you feel when somebody would do it to you, and they start describing those feelings, then they can understand that maybe what they did to the other kid was not nice and not appropriate. And I like that, because they can still, with adults, it's kind of reverse, right? If you ask an adult typically how they're feeling, you get a whole rational answer. But with kids, they're still so open. And I think you can also, indeed, what you say, when you share it and they realize it's okay. And also that anger doesn't mean shouting or all kind of other things, that there are also, that it's okay, but we have to figure out ways, of course, to regulate that are constructive. I think it sets the example. And I mean, for adult coaching, I would even say that's like when you are a coach and you never get tapped, then you cannot expect others to be okay with being tapped by a lower belt. You have to set the example. And I think whether it's with kids or with adults, you need to set the example. If you want adult people to be totally okay being tapped, also being caught by lower belts, which with CLA type of approach will happen all the time anyways, especially if you scale up for yourself and make things more difficult. If you show that, then they have no issue. Like in our school, for instance, no student is out really to, they want to tap the coaches. They don't care because it happens all the time anyways, because we play these games. Sometimes we the higher level, they constrain themselves further. So it's like we find this sweet spot where both can really get to the task. It's like the perfect sweet spot for them for learning. And I think for kids, it's the same thing, especially with emotion regulation, because co-regulation becomes for self-regulation. So if we as coaches cannot regulate ourselves, we cannot co-regulate, so they cannot. And can you maybe say something about that? Because that's a very big thing in kids coaching.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's funny that you say that about like even the adults as well, because I don't know how many times I've been tapped by like this one white belt in my class. Love her to death. She's got like 20 kilos on me. And I don't know why I keep ending up with this thumbs up. Sorry. But she's amazing at what she does. She's strong and she's got all of these athletic abilities that I could only dream of having. And so when we get put into positions, if I'm stuck on bottom mount with her, it's really hard. I can't get out. If she's on my back with a seatbelt position and 2 hooks in, it's really hard. And I think that this is exactly where CLA is so good at really removing the ego of things, because you can't do CLA with an ego. There's just no way, because, I mean, you can. I've seen people do it, but they didn't learn anything. And I think that's something, I guess, a little bit more adults, but that is something as well, that if your only goal is to win every time, you kind of miss the opportunity to learn anything. And then you're going to be wondering why it's not working and why you're not learning. And it's like, well, you're not learning because you don't want to learn, you want to win. And so that's like a big thing, I think, for adults. But in kids as well, I think being able to be okay with being in uncomfortable situations and being in uncomfortable positions is massive and a huge benefit of CLA as well. I mean, we talk about they're getting more experience in certain areas as well, but that emotional regulation, I think CLA allows you to learn more life skills than the traditional teaching. Now, take out whatever you feel about CLA versus IP, just remove all of this weird drama that goes on and just acknowledge that kids learn best through play, and that we're giving kids an opportunity to be in positions that are uncomfortable. And this is why it's really important, if you choose to use CLA as a kids coach, that you understand the cues of the children. Because when you don't, you have the potential to really not damage, but it's detrimental to their learning. And one bad class is it. If they have one bad class and they step off the mats and they're like, I'm never coming back, they won't come back. It's not like adults where you're rational and you're like, oh man, that was a bad class. Oh, it was the hammer and the nail. I was the nail today. No, kids are like, I didn't like how that felt and I'm never going to do that again. And you've lost them. So being able to really understand the cues of kids, understanding how to create games and constraints and things that are safe for the children, particularly around time. I think sometimes we leave kids in positions a little bit too long. Because we're like, oh no, they've nearly got it, they're nearly out. But actually maybe they're panicking. It's gone past that. I think that when it's used well, we have the opportunity to teach kids how to do hard things, how to work under pressure, how to problem solve, how to communicate better with your partner. Because even in situations where you might be stuck, in our academy, if someone's really stuck and the kid's like, I can't get out, then their friend will help them. Their friend's going to be like, oh, well, maybe maybe you could try turning that way, try that and see if that works. And it's not like they're giving the answer and it's becoming a lesson on how to hipscape and move. It's like, hey man, I can see that you're pretty stuck. Why don't you just try moving your hips this way and see? And then they're like, okay, and they'll try it and they'll get out. It doesn't even require me stepping in to be, I mean, if I need to, of course I will. But usually they just talk to each other and they're like, I'm stuck, I can't get out. And I'm like, try this and see if that works. And then they'll do it and they're like, oh, okay, that works, cool. It's peer learning as well. So then you're talking about building autonomy, independence, leadership. I could go on, but essentially I just feel like you get so much more life skills out of this particular way of coaching and teaching kids than you would in a traditional way.
Before I ask you how you found COA, for our listeners, I just kind of, when the opportunity arises, I just want to add that, because some people in the Jiu-Jitsu space think that COA and IP are opposites, but they're not. I'm just saying IP also does not favor rote repetition. They do also not favor drilling. It's just how that the way how we perceive in IP, they think it's more like a computer process. We have to process things first before we make decisions, and so we can move. Whereas by COA, we think it's all direct, it's perception action coupling. So we don't, like a computer, we don't have to analyze all the input. Just want to have this said again, because often people indeed are like, oh, they say like, yeah, but I want IP. I'm like, no. So that's out of the way. Tell me, how did you find COA?
Yeah, this is a good one. So actually, the very first experience I had with it was before I even knew anything that it was. Before I went to Brazil, we were training at our old academy. And one of our coaches, amazing man, and I actually feel so bad for not understanding what he was trying to do at the time. He was taking a couple of the classes, and obviously we were very much using drilling and, your normal traditional way of doing things. And he started taking 1 or 2 classes, and he was putting us in these positions and giving us some goals. And we were like, what is this? Yeah. I didn't come to class to do positional sparring. I came to learn. And I feel so bad because I now know what he was trying to do. But at the time I was like, I hate this. Tell me what to do. But at the same time, my partner, Rafael, he loved these classes. He was going in because he was like a really higher level purple belt at the time. And he enjoyed them because he could explore what he wanted to do. So he was like, no, this is cool because now I don't have to do exactly what the professor wants me to do because I don't like doing it that way. I want to do it this way because this works better for my body. So he would be doing things and I would be at home being like, well, I'm not going to that class because I'm not learning anything. And I was a white belt and I had no idea at the time. So fast forward, we went to Brazil, trained there, came back, and Rafa started watching a few of Greg's podcasts. He just stumbled across Greg and he was like, this is what that guy was doing. Granted, not at the same level of understanding. This is like 2022. So we were sort of getting into it there. And then he was like, Ellie, I think you need to watch this. And I was like, okay, I'll have a look. And I started listening and watching and I was like, oh, this makes sense. Like, again, I even straight away did it for kids. I explain it because that's my whole experience with kids. And I was like, oh, this makes sense because in early childhood, everything's play-based learning. Like if they want to learn about how to pay for money at the supermarket, then we'll do a role-playing thing where we create a little supermarket and they make fake money and then they kind of like role-play it. I'm like, sorry, Laurien, that's really, can you hear that in the background? I'm so sorry. You might have to cut that one little bit. It's okay. Okay, sorry. And I was like, no, this is just play-based learning. It's the same thing. And then I was like, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense then that normal learning or traditional, whatever you want to call, that feels a little bit more like traditional schooling. So it was an interesting just little thing for me there that I was like, oh yeah, okay, this kind of makes sense. That was the way that I was able to rationalize it in my brain. So then I was like, all right, let's have a look at this a bit more. So I read them some things, looked at Rob Gray, did the whole thing. Huffer went on the biggest like rabbit hole spiral you could possibly imagine. And I think he's watched every single thing on YouTube that possibly exists. And when we decided to open our academy, he was like, I want to do it this way. So we never opened the academy as a traditional school. We always used CLA. But obviously the way that it looked in the beginning is very different to how it looks now because you grow and you evolve as a coach, which is normal. But we opened the academy and I was like, I'll take the kids. That's fine. No worries. But I remember sitting there and being like, I don't know how to do this. Like I know how to be a teacher, but I don't actually know how to make games or to do this. And so I think the first 6 months, Huffer made most of the games. So he and I would sit, I would try and make a game and he'd be like, well, this doesn't work because you're actually giving too much information here. The constraint is so constrained that there's only one possible outcome. They're going to get stuck. And I was like, no, they won't. And he's like, all right, do it. And then I'd do it and they'd get stuck and I'd be like, damn it. He's right. So this is how I came to it, was actually through the random coach at this academy who he's no longer there. He's actually at an academy in Brisbane that also does CLA. And we've reached out to him quite a few times now. And I'm like, man, you knew what was going on, but no one understood you at the time. And I'm so glad that he's now in a space that really thrives in the space that he's in now.
Yeah, some people are just, it's typical when you're like ahead of times and you're often misunderstood. So I think
Greg is that person.
He is that person, yeah, but it starts to change now. I think I feel that people now, because now many people I've seen that were very resistant at first are now kind of, and either they're all now on the COA train or they're like, yeah, I see some benefits in it. So, but I mean, the way I see it, eventually people cannot ignore it anymore because we see it in our classes. Each time we have a new generation of white belts, because we get better clearly, and also our training room gets better. So each new generation of white belts we have, it is mind-blowing how quickly they learn and they do amazing things. Like we have now a new guy, he also does like lifting. He's a really strong like chisel and he has a very good proprioception and he's very coachable. But he had like 6 classes or so. And I mean, it is now for the higher belts very hard to pass him. Like he's strong, yes, but he also really knows what to look for. 6 classes, sorry. When I had my 6 classes, I maybe could shrimp and I had some, and I still didn't know where to start. And if I learned maybe some close guard and some mount, there was something in between missing because I didn't learn that yet. And yeah, with COA, if you when you play it a bit like how Greg does it, that you more or less do the whole jiu-jitsu in one class. And with beginners, we do that anyways. They can already do some sparring. It already looks like jiu-jitsu. It looks good. They do good stuff. And that's one class. It's insane. So I think the future is going to be really interesting because also for us, like if I think about how we were last year, we improved so much and other people experimenting new ideas. Science is also, of course, always continuing. So I think sky is the limit. So yeah, it's funny how we sometimes just get inspired by somebody, how lucky we are that we just happen to be at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, completely agree. It's I'm really looking forward to seeing how I think kids jiu-jitsu evolves with this as well, because yeah, there's no denying that I don't want to say it's easier to teach this way because it's not, because it does require more work. You can't make this up. You can't go onto YouTube and watch something and be like, I'm just going to teach that to the kids today. It doesn't work like that. You do have to put in the work to understand things. And I understand also sometimes when you're new to coaching or you're new to kids coaching in general, sometimes the information can feel a little bit hard to process and understand too, especially, with some of the language in the constraint-led approach. I understand this, and this is something that I do get told. So I try to simplify things as much as possible with new coaches who are wanting to experiment with it. And that's why, we talk about the games and we talk about, well, just what are you going to focus on in that game, or what do you want them to do, rather than trying to use the language around it just to make things a little bit easier for them. But I'm looking forward to seeing, I've seen coaches who are very much on the fence about it, and they have started trying it a little bit more. I have one particular person in my coaching community, and he is in Norway, and he's a wonderful man, wonderful, wonderful man. And he's in a very, very traditional school, but he loves CLA. He loves it so much, and he's learning everything that he can about it. And he's actually managed to get his coaches to look at some of this stuff. So he's just talking to them and being like, look, can I do this game with these kids and just see what happens? And then he's doing these games, and then he's getting results. And the coaches are like, that's kind of cool. And he's like, yeah, I learned it from this. And then he's showing them. And then all of a sudden we're getting coaches who maybe they don't even know what it is yet, or they're on the fence and they're starting to see results. They're starting to see the potential in what you can do when you put the work in. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that sort of, I think in the next 12 to 18 months really evolves in kids jiu-jitsu.
I hope so. I think so too. I think one of the major obstacles for coaches that are used to the traditional approach is that they do not understand fully the difference between knowledge of and knowledge about. And I think that makes them insecure, because you can have coaches that say also competed very well. They clearly, their jiu-jitsu is good. But then two things can be true at the same time, that you can have a lot of knowledge about something, your skill level, but it doesn't mean that you also have knowledge of, that you truly understand what you're doing. I mean, I went to seminars also from, the world champions back in the day. And then when you would ask them why they would do it, they could never really explain it to you. It was more like, yeah, that's just how I like to do it. So their body, they perceive it somehow, and they will do the right thing also when they are on the mat, on the competition mats. But they can be amazing and not understand the depth, like how jiu-jitsu works. And I think that when coaches start to understand this, that there are two different ways of understanding grappling or the art of jiu-jitsu, what we're doing with, that they just need to invest a little bit in that other skill set and they will be fine. I mean, I had discussions also with coaches, and they got very insecure because of this, that they thought that they understand jiu-jitsu, but then with the COA approach, it turns out they don't. But it's also not completely true, because in a way they do. It's just that COA requires a different type of understanding. And I think that slowly coaches are getting to terms with that it doesn't mean that they suck, doesn't mean that they don't know any jiu-jitsu or that their jiu-jitsu is bad. It's just a different way of understanding. And yes, that takes some time. Like also with terminology, I started saying, like, look, if you want to do gi jiu-jitsu, you need a gi. And it's the same with COA, is that like when you want certain things, you need certain things. Like if you want to go to university, you will need books because you will have to go through it. And with COA, there are just also sometimes some terminology that you just need to learn, because then it's actually pretty concise and easier to grasp. It's like this 80, 20% for 80% of the work kind of thing. But yeah, I also think that soon, especially with kids coaching, I think we'll see a big shift. You see it already happening now. So I think indeed in 18 months from now, I think we'll be a much better space.
Yeah, completely agree.
So as we're coming to a close, is there anything specific that you would like to share on this topic, or also, of course, what you are offering online? I will put it all in the show notes that people know where to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I see kids jiu-jitsu going in so many directions at the moment, and I see, coaching going in so many directions. And I guess the biggest takeaway that I constantly just want to share is connection over correction. And when you connect, you don't always have to correct, because you've built a space that's safe. You build a space where they trust you. And in coaching, especially with kids, like you and even in your space, so you're doing trauma-informed coaching, you know this, that You need to be able to build that safe space with people. We're working with vulnerable people. Kids are vulnerable beings. They're very small, they're innocent, they trust you and they look to you. So give them the best opportunity that they can, because realistically, how many of these kids are going to become black belts that we coach? Probably a very, very small number, right? How many kids are going to experience jiu-jitsu? Eventually, one day they'll leave, but they're going to grow up with the skills that they learned on the mats. A lot. And then one day, those kids are going to grow up and they're going to have kids. And then they're going to be like, I remember that coach. I remember that I went to jiu-jitsu and they taught me how to believe in myself. I'm going to put my kids in jiu-jitsu. And this is how the next generation should be. Stop trying to make it into something that it doesn't need to be, and just recognize that jiu-jitsu is a vessel for life skills. For kids, once they get to teenagers and they're at the level that they actually can comprehend things, that they understand decisions and choices, for sure, if they decide they want to be a world-class athlete, go for it, 100%. But there is no small child that needs to be pushed into this direction. Teach them the vessel, teach them the skills, and then one day you might be lucky enough that someone walks through your door, that they've had their own kids, and they bring their kids back to you because you were the one that made the difference in their life. So if anything I can say, take that with it. And I have a school community. Jump in on there as well. Jump in. I currently have a little free tier going on at the moment where you can jump in, have a little look around, see what some other coaches are doing. I share a little bit of information to help you to understand what I do, the language that I use, how it can make a difference to your coaching journey. And when you're ready, the premium option is there for you, where we go through 12 months together, essentially from the beginning with Foundations of Kids Coaching all the way through storytelling, through CLA, through curriculums and planning, the whole way through. And yeah, it's just a safe space. It's not a space of ego. There's no one who knows more than the other. I don't know more than anyone else in there as well. I ask questions. But I think that that's what the jiu-jitsu community needs, is that it needs community. It needs to recognize that you don't have to be better than anyone else. And yeah, the space, I mean, I even have people who don't do CLA at all. And there's no ego, there's no competitions, there's no arguing about it. It's just, yeah, what it should be.
Then you're doing something very beautiful, because community is something, it's a practice. It's not something that you have. Just because you put people together doesn't mean you have community. It's a constant practice. So that means you're doing something very well. I thank you very much for this talk. I think many people will get a lot out of it, and I hope strengthen their resolve to be just epic kids coaches and to continue, because we all know sometimes it can be a little bit disheartening every now and then. So thank you again. And well, I'm pretty sure we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, Ellee, for sharing your wisdom and expertise. Once again, it becomes clear that coaching is more than just being skilled at a specific martial art or sport. Next time when we are on the mat, let's bear in mind to connect before we correct, to practice community building, safety, and self-autonomy. Thank you for listening, and connect soon.